This video covers Mobile Station with software version 3.1.12. You find that by hitting Shift and then the wrench here in the square. Then you hit the button next to MS2 information, and here you see the version number. So the functionality shown in this video might work on newer versions than this, but may not work on older. This time I'm going to show how to add locomotives to the mobile station. There's actually many ways of adding locomotives from automatically to manual. The first thing I'm going to do is add MFX locomotive. MFX locomotives are actually automatically added to the mobile station. The first thing I make sure of is that I'm in stop mode. You see it says stop here. Basically the way to get in and out of stop mode is to hit the stop button. When I'm in stop mode, all other locomotives are stopped and the power is disconnected to the tracks, which means I can safely put my locomotive on. I got one here. That's an MFX locomotive. I need to make sure it's properly on the tracks, which I'm not having much success with right now. Okay. I look at my mobile station. I go out of stop mode. The benefit with MFX is basically that the locomotive can tell the mobile station what it can do. The mobile station here is starting to recognize that there's a new locomotive on the track. That's why it's blinking MFX. The locomotive is basically sending information to the mobile station about what it can do. And as you see, now it comes up and you can see that all the functions and everything else is prepared for the locomotive. And I can immediately start driving it by turning the knob. All right, let me do a little trick here, because now what I'm going to try and do is the little steam engine I have here is actually also an MFX, but I'm going to pretend it's not. So I told the mobile station not to recognize MFX. So I go into stop here and I'm ready to put the locomotive on. So now I got a couple of options for what I can do. You see, if I hit stop here again, it will not start blinking. What I want to do is I want to find an empty position first. So I hit the locomotive button down here. You see there's an empty position. It says plus down there. Now I want to hit shift and then the locomotive or the wrench here, which basically means configure locomotive. Since there's no locomotive, it will say, do you want to add a new locomotive? Now I have a couple of options. I can add it from the database. I can scroll down. I can enter it manually. I can scroll further down and I can hit find. Okay. If this was a locomotive that was not an MFX one, I could actually go in here and hit the database. So you saw I selected database, and here is all the an extensive database of locomotives. And basically what you have out here to the left is the Märklin number, and then you have the ID of the locomotive. So for example, you could choose 26020, which is ICE2, which is a Märklin locomotive without MFX. So if I want that one, I click on the button next to it, and then you see now I got an ICE2. It seems like it didn't have many functions, this particular one I chose. Okay, let's try again. So I hit locomotive, so I got a new spot. I hit shift here. I scroll down again. Now I want to try and see if I can find my locomotive. So the mobile station is actually capable of looking for non-MFX locomotives too. So it's a certain set of more modern decoders. So I hit find here. You see it looks for the locomotive. And basically what it does is it tries various addresses and go out and see if there's a locomotive out there. Now this can take some time. Oh, actually it didn't take too long. So actually what you see it did there is, and it gave it a name. It said, I found a standard locomotive with a Märklin decoder, MM2, and it's actually address 78. So, and it already pre-configured a couple of functions in here. Now there's a good chance these may or may not be correct. So that is something we will look at in another episode on how to configure these. Okay, now let's try and add a locomotive manually. As before, we hit the locomotive button until we find an empty spot, and you can see the plus. You hit shift and then the wrench. We're gonna go down and then we're gonna click on the one to enter it manually. Now you got a couple of options in here. The first one is whether or not it's a old style decoder that has dip switches. Then you would choose the top one. If it's one that's a more old style non-MFX decoder, you will choose the programmable one. You can actually also add DCC decoders to here. I'm not gonna go through that though. So I'm gonna use the programmable one. So again, I have this little locomotive. I'm gonna treat it as a non-MFX locomotive, and then I'm gonna add it. So I'm gonna select the MM2 programmable. Now here comes, I have to know the address. Now for the locomotives that don't have dip switches, look in the manual for the locomotive. It will say what the address is in there. Most likely you will never have to really do that, because remember, you could go in and find it in the database. And if it's in the database, it's easy. You can always just go in there and then you can find it. Now I'm gonna pretend this one is actually not in the database, which also means it most probably will not be a Märklin locomotive. Cool. It says 1. I can hit the buttons here next to the numbers, plus and minus. If I say plus, it goes up. If it says minus, it goes down. If I hold in plus, you can see it jumps. Now, a tip here is I can also hit shift, and then I can turn the knob, and then I can jump faster around. Now, what I need now is 78, because I know that's the little locomotive down there. Here comes a warning. Now that's because we already added this locomotive once. So here you got to be careful. Do you want to add it or don't you want to add it? Now if you have another locomotive with the same address but you don't have it on the track and you're sure you never have it on the track at the same time, hit yes. Otherwise hit no. So we're going to hit no. I'm going to back out of here completely, and then I'm going to hit shift and the knob, and then I'm gonna find, here was the locomotive from before when it found it automatically. So I'm gonna configure this locomotive. So I hit shift and the locomotive wrench. I'm gonna scroll down and there's a remove locomotive. I can delete it and it's gone. And I can actually use this position as well. So I hit shift, I go down, I wanna enter it manually. I'm gonna choose address 78. All right, I can give it a name. I'm not gonna do that right now. I can give it a symbol. Let me just give it something that looks like that one down there. So that would be this one here. And now you can see, by default, it always comes up with some standard functions. Again, these are some we can reconfigure as we like, but we got the locomotive in there. Yippee! Okay, let's talk a little about how to run multiple locomotives on the track. The idea is basically you choose the locomotive you want, and then you basically just turn the knob, and then the locomotive drives. In this case here, it's the steam engine. I'm gonna stop it, and as you saw, there's a speed indicator over here. I can hit shift here, and then I can actually freely go between all the locomotive positions. I only have 2 locomotives in here, the little steam engine and then the diesel engine I have to the right. So now I can actually run them both. One thing you have to be careful about, because which direction is it going? So a steam engine has a chimney in front. So you see here it says there's a arrow over here that actually indicates that it's going forward. And if I turn the knob, indeed it is going forward. I can hit the button and then it'll be going backwards. Now, let me go to the diesel engine. So, is it going forwards or backwards? Well, to the right is actually forward, and to the left is backwards. So it's actually going backwards right now. But how do I know which direction the locomotive is going? Well, if you didn't put the locomotive on, you really don't know, so you better try. So let me just try. I guess that is backwards. And as you saw there, it did continue in the same direction even though I changed direction. So if it's just powered on or just mounted, maybe the mobile station and locomotive do not agree on the direction. So always test it and make sure you change the direction and see where it's going. So now it's actually going backwards. The secret on many Märklin locomotives to what's forward and backward is usually where the slider is. So the slider on this locomotive is actually on that bogie over there. So that's actually forward. And we can verify that by going forward. I can turn the knob and you can see it's actually going forward. Okay. Now, if I want to, I can drive both locomotives at the same time. I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to start this locomotive. Oh, I guess I'm not fast enough. So here you got to be careful. I'm going to do the steam engine now. So, it was actually set for backwards, so it's good I didn't do that. I'm going to click it to go forward. I'm going to increase the speed. I'm going to change to the diesel engine. I'm going to increase the speed. And as you can see, now I got two locomotives running. And you got to be careful you don't hit. So the diesel engine is faster than the steam engine. Okay, let me talk a little about the stop mode. So the stop mode basically takes the power away from the tracks, and in that way everything stops on the track. So here I got two locomotives running. So let's say that the diesel engine might be catching up on the steam engine, and I'm getting in a dangerous situation. So what I can do on my mobile station is basically hit stop, okay? And then, as you see, all locomotives, actually everything on the tracks, stops. Now, if I hit stop again, which I wouldn't advise if something was about to happen, but just for illustration, let me show it. So I hit stop again, I'm out of stop mode, and then you actually see they all resume back to the original speed. I'm gonna speed up. Well, actually you can see it's coming by itself. The diesel engine is catching up with the steam engine. I'm gonna hit stop. I think I was lucky. I think the couplers are basically touching. So now I want to get out of this situation. How do I do this? What I recommend you do is you can basically send commands to the locomotive, not while it's in stop mode, but they will send as soon as they come out of stop mode. So what I will do is I will tell the diesel engine, do not move. And just to be safe, let me just choose all the locomotives I have on the track. So here's my steam engine. I'll put it to 0. And now when I go out of stop mode, the locomotives basically didn't move. And now I can easily recover from the situation I'm in. Another thing to talk about is what happens if I'm at speed and you just hit the knob, which is basically change direction. So generally I would recommend always change direction when the locomotive is at speed 0. It's safe to do so. If the locomotive is running, as here, and now I'm hitting the knob now, then you see that it actually stops immediately when I hit the button and the direction is changed. I would say, yeah, do it if you're in a pickle and it's an emergency, but do consider the stop button. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it, because I'm unsure if the mechanics and gears inside like the abrupt stop of the knob and change direction. You could also be unlucky if you hit the knob a little, let's say a little crooked, and then you might actually at the same time set speed, so maybe you might end up setting speed the other way. I'm not sure it's good for the locomotive. I would recommend not to do it. Let's look at how to activate the functions in the locomotive. So here I have a locomotive with a lot of functions. It's actually the yellow one down there. So in order to activate the functions, I press one of the keys next to the function on the display. So for example, here there's a light. If I click on this one here, it will actually activate the light. On the bottom one here, you see a horn. If I click on this one here, it will actually activate the horn, and so forth. And now we only have 8 buttons here next to the display, and that's so you can only really get to function 0 through 7, and that's what it says here on the display. But how do you get to the others? Well, easily. You basically just hit the shift button and hold it in, and then you see all the icons change. Now it says F8 through 15 there, and now we can get to the next 8 functions. And in that way, we can get to all the functions. And if you do it slowly, it's a little easier to do. So I first click once, and then I click twice, and now you see I go to 16 to 23, and in that way I can easily change between them all.